mic again. Welcome back to Shadow Light. Thank you for joining us as we move through apathy and overwhelm to collective action and hopeful pathways forward. This is the last part of our 3-part series, collabing with Shadow's Bookshelf, our book club that we run, and it was our cluster around speculative futures and imagining. And yeah, this episode we're going to be talking about the big boy. The big boy, The Dispossessed by Ursula Le Guin. I think we're all a bit like, we've only got maybe like half an hour to talk about this book, which is hard. But I guess, Isabella, do you want to give us like a bit of an intro into the book?
Yeah, sure thing. So if you don't already know, this book is written by one of the greats of like science fiction writing, Ursula Le Guin. Who is an author. I think this is an easier way to like go into explaining what the book is about, is through explaining her. She's an author whose body of work includes 23 novels, 12 volumes of short stories, 11 volumes of poetry, 13 children's books, 5 essay collections, and 4 works of translation.
Booked and busy.
She's booked and busy and has many books to tell about it. Yeah, like she...
Books, I just got that. Books.
I didn't even mean that.
Yeah.
Booked up. Like.
No, that was incredible. That was like just seamless. But yeah, like I think that's kind of reflected in this book itself. It's like it's part of a universe. Like it's part of a world of worlds that she is creating. And she's known for her works of speculative fiction, including sci-fi works set in her Hainish universe and the Earthsea fantasy series. And it's said to have redefined the scope and style of utopian fiction. Ooh. And there's all sorts of strong influences that you can pick up in this one. You know, cultural anthropology, Taoism, anarchism, feminism, the writings of Carl Jung as well. So many different ideas and frameworks that we're being introduced to. And it was written in 1974. It explores themes such as anarchism, prison abolition, revolutionary societies, capitalism, utopia, individualism, collectivism. So it's full, guys. It's a full book. It is however many, almost over 300 pages.
But it's like 300 pages where the text is really small.
Very small.
You know, when you're like reading, you're like, this is a 70s book, because I'm looking at I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
It's chunky.
It's written in quite an interesting way as well. It's the chapters kind of fluctuate between like these different planets that someone is on. And much of the plot is being built off of this idea of like there's this principle of simultaneity. So this kind of physics theory.
It's a lot of physics.
Which could revolutionize interstellar civilization by making possible instantaneous communication.
What, between planets?
Between planets.
Mad thing.
So it's the life work of Shevek, who is this brilliant physicist from the anarchist world of Anares, a planet which is pretty desolate when we're looking at like the climate conditions, and like it's a hard life, but it's, you know, anarchist, very collectivist, and Shevek's work is being stifled by these jealous colleagues that are on his planet. So what he does is he travels from Anares to the sister planet Eurus, hoping to find more tolerance for his ideas there. But he soon finds himself being used as a pawn in this very deadly political game.
Because Eurus is kind of based more on our planet right now. It's like it's still not exactly the same, but it kind of speaks to the ecological diversity of our world, like us having different states, capitalism, and then like kind of stifled forms of communism, or like and there's like tensions between different countries which don't exist on his home planet Anares, which is this like one collective society. So it's kind of the juxtaposition of these two worlds and moving between them is through the eyes of this one scientist.
Yeah. And you see how so in the state that he's in on Eurus, there's dissent on its borders, and a revolution is being sparked. And so his presence on this planet definitely kind of like has a part to play in sparking this revolution that's like kind of going off. So there's interests of like the kind of the state government to keep him behind closed doors and like away from the people, the masses, with his idea. So yeah, it's quite a journey, I have to say. I picked it specifically for this series because so the second book that we did, Begin the World Over, I loved that it focused on the Haitian Revolution, but obviously it was very US kind of centric in terms of like politics and history. And so like kind of very much focused on the global north in some ways. And then like Palestine was nice because it was a difference from that. But with this one, I was like, okay, let's put forward a speculative fiction or like sci-fi work that is detached from any ideas that we might have of like attachments to nation states and like what their politics or history may be. So it really challenges us to like engage with the ideas, not just like our emotional attachments to these particular contexts. But yeah, it's quite a full read. And when I was trying to choose extracts for it for the readers, it was really challenging because there's a lot of world building that happens, and it's not told in a chronological order. So yeah.
I bet that was hard.
Yeah, it was not easy. And if any of them are listening to this, apologies.
I kind of think you just got to read the book, even if you don't get to it by the book club. Like, take as long as you need because there's a lot to digest.
Yeah.
But like, it's one of those books. I was saying this to the guys before. It's one of those books I've been pretending I've read for about 5 years, and I was like, yeah, I read that, and it's like, okay, we're really glad I was forced to read it. But there's a lot to sit with.
There is. There really is.
Like, one of the things that I love about the book is how Ursula Le Guin builds worlds so meticulously, like, and critically as well. Like, kind of in this book, we see 3 different forms of society, if you actually include one that sort of comes in at the end. And they're all, like, even this kind of anarchist utopia that the main character, was born and is heralded from, is still treated incredibly critically. And so it's not like a good world, bad world. It's like okay, here's a bunch of ideas being enacted in practice. What if you were to experience them through the eyes as if you were living in them?
Yeah.
How would that experience be? And how would you be emboldened, empowered, but also stifled in other ways? It's yeah. So I think that's what we were kind of talking about before, like her criticalness of these things that we talk about here in terms of ideology, but if they played out in practice, what would it look like? It's really well done.
Yeah, it really, that's, I kind of had like a question to do with like, or kind of like a phrase that was attached to each of the sessions that we did. And for this one, it was what happens the day after revolution. Because this is set obviously in a context where, so people have settled this planet of, Anaras. Like, it is the basically this group of people that believe in this ideology of Odonianism, who once lived on the planet that we're kind of associating with Earth, but it's called Uras. Like, they leave to settle this new planet of Anaras, trying to put into practice these revolutionary ideals and ways of organizing themselves. And so it's meeting a group of people after we're kind of like assuming the revolutionary society is set up and functioning and working. Like, we're meeting this society at a point where like it's been doing what it's been doing for a while, trying to survive, but they're kind of coming to terms with the limitations that there are to putting their ideological kind of ideals into practice, both based off of their geography, but also just like human nature, like, and conflicts that there are amongst like people,
lack of resources.
So yeah, it's quite an interesting one. Like, you kind of expect that, oh, it's sci-fi, it's gonna be this like look at a utopia and we're gonna learn so much and like just take down notes and be like, let's implement this. But I think there's a lot that you take away that you're like, that's what I'm not gonna try and do.
Yeah.
Like, as well as, oh, that's an interesting way of working through a problem. But yeah, and I think it's quite it's quite interesting as well because I can see it. I can see it being read like numerous times by someone, like at different parts of their life, and them gaining something from it. But what's quite interesting is the role of language that comes up with this one, which it has done in the earlier episodes of this miniseries, is the difference between the ideologies of like the Adonianism and the collectivist ideology there is on Inares versus the proprietarianism that there is on like this capitalist world of Eurus, right? You see how even like the ideology is carried through in language in ways that they socially organize their economies, even their like educational approaches, and how just how much of a contrast there is really interesting. Like, I don't know, there was specific things I think you had picked up with like the language aspect with Adonianism of like referring to even like family members not in this like you are my wife or whatever. It's like you call each other like sister, brother, all of that.
There's like no ownership. There's no ownership. There's no ownership, and like it's so interesting when he comes to this new earth and like how ownership is in the language of everything, and he has to sort of like translate that back into what it would into his home planet's language, which doesn't have any ownership. So it's like it's kind of like if like it like doesn't directly translate, and that struggle of translation I think really exposes how much ownership is in the language that we use. Sorry, do you want to finish your point?
No, that's what I was gonna say. Is like it was really eye-opening, for sure. I think also just kind of seeing how co-optation works was something that came up again and again, and like these attempts at absorbing and neutralizing these revolutionary ideas and how people resist that co-optation. So yeah, like people would have like obviously when this guy Shevek, when he travels to this new planet, they're trying to kind of like absorb his ideals in terms of like they kind of keep him locked up in this ivory tower away from the people, and he's like producing this knowledge that can be shared with like the elites of this society, but they don't let him like interact with certain people and all of this. Like he's given us a very false sense of freedom, very limited. And we don't just see it there though, like we also see it in the life that that he has back on Inares. Like while he was on Uras, it's like he's given all of like, the privileges of like riches and property and all of these things as a way to distract from the fact that like he's not free to really think and share his ideas and create. But back on Inares, it's like when he's creating these revolutionary, like this revolutionary theory that he has, even though he's meant to be part of this revolutionary society that is about like democratization of knowledge and property and things, like there's people within the like institute that he works in that are like working to try and take credit for his work, or feel as if it's going to like threaten the nature of their society if they're interacting with other societies and sharing it with them. So I think it really like brings into focus the contradictions that there can be when we're trying to like create utopias either way.
And I think like one of the things I love about it is like again, it's very 70s, but it's kind of like Ursula Le Guin in some ways trying to show how anarchist principles might work in practice, right? A lot of this is based in like abolitionist thinking, I would say. And like, so there are scenes where Shevek, this main character, is explaining how his society runs to this new society, and they literally can't understand what he's talking about. This is one scene where he explains prisons are like a theme throughout the book, like how different societies think about prisons. And there's this scene where Shevek's explaining his homeworld to the children of one of his colleagues who are being like, what keeps people in order? What keeps people from robbing and murdering each other? And he says, no one owns anything to rob. If you want things, you just take them from the depository. As for violence, well, I don't know, Oi. That's the name of the character. Would you murder me ordinarily? And if you felt like it, would a law stop you? Coercion is the least efficient means of obtaining order. So it's so interesting to watch, like, sometimes ideas that I really struggle to explain to people who haven't, like, done reading in abolition, I find it really hard to explain these ideas simply. And so that character of Shevik does a really good job of explaining some of these ideas really simply. And then you can zoom out and go back to like Ursula Le Guin's world building, where you can actually see like she's pretty meticulously mapped out how the society would work without prisons and like built the values for the culture that enables that. But then there's this idea of like how in this society without prisons, they've kind of replaced prisons with this idea of a social prison where like if you have ideas that challenge what all those think about you while that everyone's kind of equal, they find that frightening and you get outcast, and that's kind of serves as a form of imprisonment or repressive state functions through different means. So it's like really interesting. And I kind of have a question. My question for this was like, okay, so this is idea of these two worlds. One of them is settled by people who 200 years ago set up a revolution. It was like too effective, so they were like, here, have this planet and set up your society. Would you guys go?
See, I feel like it's a form of co-optation. Like the very fact that they were offered like, okay, here's this piece of land, go take it, and just like, you know, you guys go like settle and colonize that. Like that is a form of co-optation in and of itself. And it makes me think a lot about the whole like two-state solution conversation that comes up in relation to Palestine. People are like, oh, there'll be peace if like people have like, you know, two separate parts of land. I'm like, but that still doesn't undo the hierarchies that there are, and the like dynamics of oppression in those relationships, right? So yeah, I don't know. I feel like I would not go. Like, I think I'd stay on the planet and try and find a way to just overthrow the...
Because they were close. That was the whole point. They were close, so they gave them another planet.
They were so close. They were so close.
What about you, Larissa?
That's really hard.
Would you go?
I don't know. If someone tomorrow was like, okay, black people... I don't know why I said all that. But like, black people, here's your planet. Like, you're causing too much stress here. So just like, here's a planet. I think I would go.
Yeah?
I think I would go.
Yeah.
I'm just being honest. Like, I think I'd be like, cool,
let's see what would happen if we could run things. And
obviously, I think though it's really important that there's criticality in that and being like, it wouldn't be perfect, like, but at least we'd be starting from somewhere different. Because I think what I often find difficult with, you know, when you're explaining to people about like this radical reimagination and like where we go and and they're like, okay, but we're not there, so how do we get there? I find it really hard succinctly to communicate like that it's going to take a lot of little steps along the way and like a lot of shifts along the way and a lot of movements in power, and like how do you communicate that in a 5-minute elevator like length conversation. But anyway, like I guess if you're starting from a different scratch, it's easier to then
bring people on board.
Yeah. Because actually, so I read a couple of reviews about The Dispossessed. I did not read The Dispossessed itself. And like going back to what you said, Isabella, about this book completely reframing science fiction, one of the chapters in this review called The Dynamic and Revolutionary Utopia of Ursula Le Guin, the chapter is in The New Utopian Politics of Ursula Le Guin's The Dispossessed. And Lawrence Davis is talking about like how some people argue that the limitations of utopias are that they have no historical roots and that they assume a consensus of values, but also of how institutions should be arranged. And then the third thing he was talking about is that they exist in isolation with the processes that disrupt and change them not being kind of reckoned with. And actually, like if we're talking about this new potential planet, like it is in isolation from those processes, right? It is in isolation from those limitations. But of course, the argument that Lawrence Davis is making is that Ursula Le Guin completely shifts that and is actually talking about, and you can speak to this better than I can, but talking about like utopianism in a way that is recognition of all of those things. So yeah, I thought that was really cool, and it was one of the things that is convincing me that I do actually need to read it. But yeah, do you find that there's a utility in, or more utility in dystopia, in utopia rather, that has that rootedness in challenge and in, I don't know, and not just the, oh, this could be great, but this could be great, but there will still be issues with this great thing.
I think they both have value in different ways.
I don't think it's an either or situation.
I was kind of hoping that would be what you, because I haven't read it, so I'm like, I'm looking at all three of the books and thinking like, well, how do you use these as a jumping off point, right? And so I'm just interested to see your perspective on whether it is an either or, but like the fact that it's not is actually really reassuring. I think.
I mean, I was complimenting Isabella about this when we were like having a little break, because I think they work so well as a three. I think they bring in so many. I think reading Palestine plus 100 and Bringing the World Over before you read The Dispossessed are a really good primer, because I was saying this outside. The Dispossessed doesn't deal with race massively, really actually at all. It deals a lot with kind of like gender and class, but race doesn't really come into it. So I feel like Begin the World Over and Palestine 100 provide like a really important kind of like supplementary additional reading list to frame the ideas in this book in a way that makes sense, I think, for our current context. But there's also a bunch, like I love, I've spoken about this on the podcast before, I love solar punk, which is a little bit sometimes like there's not super rooted in history. It's like let's imagine a utopia and what ideas can we explore in kind of this different context, and then you can kind of bring it back to the now. And there's a really amazing book called what's it called? The Monk and the Robot. I can't remember what it's called. Let me Google it in a sec. But it's like a completely
The Monk and the Robot.
Something like that. Hang on, like give me 1 second.
Because we've spoken about solar punk loads of times, but I've never heard about this monk or this robot.
Hang on, sorry. Psalm for the Wild Bill. How did
you get the monk?
Because it's about a monk and a robot. It's about a monk and a robot. And they become besties. Anyway, it's so... that one's so like not at all rooted in any kind of historical context that we can relate to. It's like and that I found really nice as well to kind of, again, it's like exploring what, alternatives could be in practice. And I don't think you can have kind of one without the other. I think you need both. And then you've got the work of kind of like things like The Dispossessed, which bridge those two. But yeah, I think basically this book club is like, oh my God, I need to read more speculative fiction. I want to read loads. I want to read it all.
I'm so glad that's what you came away with. I think also one of the things that made me came away with, and the speaker of the session that we had this time, Yara Rodriguez Fowler, spoke to in their part, was how there's different types of interventions that you can make in a story when you're writing creatively, but in particular sci-fi. So there's plot-based interventions, and then there's like form-based interventions, so like how it's written versus like the content of what's in there. And she was saying how when we write any fiction, we are making a deal, we're suspending disbelief. This expands the political horizon of the reader and is very important living in this neoliberal world. And she was being inspired by this writer called Isabel Weidner, I think is her name, who wrote Sterling Karat Gold, which I have not read, but I feel like I should. And the exercise, basically, for some context, Yara Rodriguez Fowler is a British-Brazilian novelist who grew up in South London. And we had invited her to join us to take us through this creative writing exercise and speak a little bit about, as a way of speaking about like how we write creatively in sci-fi. Because I wanted people to like realize like, okay, you're reading, but you could also do this too. Like you can write as well.
That's so cool.
And make it a little bit more interactive. And we did this writing exercise called Spaceship Moment. So like she got us to describe an average morning in our daily life, and then choose, after we've done that, choose one thing that you would transform about the world that you live in and see how it changes your routine. So like this might be something like whether or not people have to work, whether or not cars exist, whether or not mental health support is available to everybody. And then we would introduce a transformation, like in the second part, introduce a transformation not in the world you're writing about, but the way you're writing about it. So that was like the plot-based versus form-based intervention. And yeah, I think it was just like really interesting because she was saying every text should be trying to make this spaceship moment in the life of the reader. Ooh. Like something that absolutely like transforms the way they think about their society and like the possibility of how it could run. And I think The Dispossessed does that. It makes this intervention for anyone who wants to imagine what would it be like if if possession wasn't a thing, essentially, like, and then seeing a creative way that this society is going about trying to imagine a world without possession, a world without, capitalism as we know it. But yeah, so I thought that was really lovely to experience actually in this session, is like not just talking about what we had read, but also like having a go at it ourselves.
Yeah.
And imagining, putting it into practice. But
that's really, really cool. Oh my gosh, I'm sad I missed that.
Yeah.
And it's a reminder that like reading is compelling in that way. Like it forces us to see ourselves as part of this world building process, you know, and especially the books that you've chosen for this cluster. Like it just feels like reading is not seen as a passive act in any of these books. It's seen as something that's supposed to like push us to like see and hear and then act and do. So yeah,
true.
Go all the way off.
I know we're coming towards the end of time, but I don't know if there were any other things that you wanted to share with us about the Dispossessed, because it feels like it's so massive and we're trying to condense it down into like.
It is.
I think there's like, it's really good to read because there are really so many confronting moments to kind of experience like the world that we live on through the eyes of someone who lives completely differently. And I think that reframe helps you question things that we think are inevitable as not being inevitable. And I think that's what it does really, really well, through the eyes of a character that you empathize with, but is flawed, like incredibly flawed. I think encountering some of ideas that we talk about a lot in organizing through that lens is really helpful. And I think specifically if you are interested in things like anarchism and abolition and like non-hierarchy, collectivism, and you've experienced them in movement building, or maybe you even, do your thing in your community and you've got like those alternative little economies going, like go off. What would it look like if those values were scaled up? I think it's a really like, at times inaccessible, but overall, I want to suggest it to some of my like friends who are maybe more questioning of like how those things could actually work in practice. Like, you're being too ideological. I'm like, well, maybe read this and see how you feel. Because I'm not like uncritical of all of these ideas, but as we said, it like the fiction allows you to kind of be more embodied as you're reading it, rather than just being like an idea, shutting it down. That's my kind of like thoughts on who might enjoy reading it.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think it's a book that must be read in company, to be fair. Like, I think it's a really good one to discuss with other people.
Yeah.
Not just because at times it can be challenging. So, like, it's nice to have a little bit of, like, moral support, but also just, like, checking, did I understand that right? But, yeah, just because a lot of it is world building. And it's nice to be able to share that with somebody else. And kind of have a go at imagining what it would be like to implement it. But yeah, I think also like people that are maybe looking into exploring like different ways of like relationally living. So like how we navigate relationships, friendships, family and all of that, like kin in general. I think it's interesting from that perspective too, seeing how like a capitalist society versus non-capitalist society impacts how we kind of socially organize.
I think through the main characters, like relationships with other people, that really exposes like how the system affects how we treat each other. That's really well done. And the other thing to say is that me and Isabella were talking about this outside. If you've read the first 4 pages and are struggling with them, push through to like page 10. Like the first 4 pages, I was like, what the actual heck is going on? I don't understand what any of this is saying. I actually don't know what they're talking about. It gets more legible after that, and then you're just kind of reading a normal book. But push through, I promise.
Yeah, but in many ways, it's a radical act, that pushing through in the first 10 pages.
I'm screaming.
Because, like, we don't know what's promised on the other side of liberation. But here we are being like, I want it.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And you need the external accountability of a book club. Join our next arc. bookshelf thing.
I like arc.
Arc.
Maybe we should start calling them arcs.
I feel like this was such a beautiful arc.
Yeah.
This bookshelf was such a beautiful arc. Yeah, if you haven't read these books, I would really suggest reading them in this order. I found it really there was something about moving through this where I was like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. Like that kind of arc.
I love how I completely understood what you said just then. That's so
Very balanced.
No, but that is actually accountability for me to read them in that order.
I actually need a book club. TikTok takes too much from my brain and I need to be like, no, you have to read this book now. Otherwise people will be disappointed in you.
My excuse has been, I'm finishing my degree.
That is a good excuse.
So
That actually is a good excuse.
Reading. But yeah, now free as a bird, so I'm gonna do it.
That's not even true. You're not free as a bird at all.
I'm not. I'm so not.
I think though coming
booked
out
and busy, but want to be booked and busy. Do you know what I'm
100%.
saying?
Yeah, 100%.
Sorry,
but I was gonna say I think coming out of studying in any academic institution, this is also an interesting one to consider in terms of democratization of knowledge and
it's criticizing the university.
Yeah,
which you
that.
again.
Yeah. That's a bit of me. That's my bag.
Yeah,
Okay, cool.
definitely.
I'm definitely gonna get into it.
Okay. Any last thoughts?
thoughts, feelings, resonations. I want to read more of Ursula Le Guin, even though it was kind of like childbirth. Like it was really hard at times, but I've almost forgotten it because it was such a great book.
Yeah.
You blocked it out.
I want to get on her fantasy stuff. I'm a fantasy girly at the end of the day. I want to get on that Earthsea.
I actually really want to get into the children's books. That's just because I'm moving into that space.
Interesting.
I would love to read them. When you said that made me just think, I would really
I did think
like
maybe at some point in the future there needs to be a shadow children's book.
There does. Because that makes me think about, you know what Leticia said on the last series about bringing children into our spaces as well. I think that would also help us communicate
1,000,000%.
way more accessibly to young people and children. Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah. How's Ursula Le Guin explaining anarchism to children?
Yeah.
Let's go. Let's find out.
Then maybe at least I'll understand it. And,
1,000,000%. Good place to start.
I'm just a baby girl in my head.
I'm a baby girl. We're just three baby girls. We're three baby girls. Okay, well, thank you so much, Isabella, for coming on.
This has been so lovely.
It's been so nice. And thank you for leading such a good bookshelf cluster. I really cannot recommend it enough to everyone who's watching or listening. And a new one will be coming soon-ish. Is that the plan?
Autumn period. Fall, wherever you are in the world. Autumn, fall, whatever you call it. The harvest.
When the trees hit the ground, no. When the leaves hit the ground.
Hopefully not.
No, trees not hitting ground. Please scratch that. When the leaves hit the ground.
When the leaves hit the ground.
Is when
the bookshelf will grow. Yeah. Okay, so watch out for that.
Planting.
Buy your t-shirts if you want to support the work that we're doing.
And it says, what happens the day after liberation?
And mine is there's stuff on the back. There you go. I don't think you'll be able to see that.
But you tried.
I tried.
And happy birthday, Zoe!
Thank you so much.
Happy
We've got a warm bottle of Prosecco right here. Woo. I'm loving life. Okay, thanks everyone. If you want to, what am I going to say? If you want to leave a comment or let us know if you've read The Dispossessed, you can do so at shadowlightpodcast@gmail.com, or you can DM us at shadow.mag. We genuinely actually really would love to hear from you, because this is just an extension of the book club for those who weren't able to make it.
Pretty much.
Really, really keen to hear people's thoughts and readings on this, because that was such a good part of the club.
No, it was.
Thanks everyone.
Yeah, thank you. Bye.